is Image Builder? Image Builder is basically just a service to build images, right? But it's beyond that, because you can build an image, you can distribute that image. You can use, it's more or less like you can create a pipeline to build an image, more or less like what exactly has to happen for that image to be built. If you want to put Docker inside, if you want to package it, anyhow you want to package it, once you are done with that, you can take that image and then use it in your application, right? But we did it in a fast way. So if you actually want to review that video, please go find a way to review that video. But again, just think about it that this class is really about Image Builder, and we're going to see exactly what it does, okay? So we want to build a basic AMI in this case. And the whole idea is that AMI is going to, if you remember, if you joined me on this call before, AMI is Amazon Machine Image. It's just every EC2 machine that is running out there has an image it is running based off, right? So, and it's usually called more or less like an AMI. So an EC2 machine would need an AMI to bring to start. And that AMI sometimes will have packages already installed. Sometimes it is during the user data script, you provide the packages you want installed, right? But sometimes it's always good you pre-install and then you use it, okay? Which is the example we're going to do today. So let's go, we'll come back to this diagram because there's something else down here that we'll have to go through, which is the one I really want to show you at the end of the day. We'll talk about event bridge pipes. But before that, let's just go to Image Builder and talk about it, okay? So we're going to go to our account. And the thing is that we'll search for Image Builder. See, the thing is, in the cloud, as you progress with your cloud journey, you notice that there are several ways to do things, right? But sometimes it's always about doing it the right way. It's always about doing it the right way. Because think about AMIs. AMIs are things that sometimes there's like a customized process of, producing AMIs. In some organizations, it's very strict. You have to go through certain ways of doing it, right? So there is a service in EC2 that is called, there's a service called EC2 Image Builder. The whole idea is that you can use it to build base images. And those base images can basically decide how that machine is brought up, okay? So what we're going to do is to make it make sense, I'm going to do create a component, right? Because when you create an EC2, an image builder, sometimes it is built off of components. There are certain components that it needs to run. So more or less like components that it will run, actions that it will run when it is building, actions that it will run when it's testing, and it will become obvious, right? But in our own case, I actually want us to start off creating a component so that we can use the component when we are creating the pipeline, okay? So here, what I would just put here, I'll say install Docker, Docker, I'll just call it Docker runtime, okay? I'll call it this. And here, I'll just call it, 1.0.0.0. So I'll say components, call it component to install Docker runtime, okay? That's the description. In this case, I think it's asking me which operating system is going to use it. It's Linux, okay? Compatible OS version, I'm going to use Linux 2023 because that's really what I want to use at the end of the day, okay? I'm just going to keep the KMS key default. Now, what you can see here is that definition, right? Definition document. This defines the EC2, the actions for EC2 image builder to perform on the image, right? And this is the fun part. You can actually write these things in template, okay? So let's look at the test example. You can see, for example, this one is saying that during the test phase, just echo hello world test, okay? You can also go and use like a build example. This is use test example, but there's also a use build example that says, echo hello world, validate it to say that, echo hello world to validate. There's also a test step, okay? We were going to create ours, okay? And in our own case, we're just going to define our own documents, okay? And I already have a document prepared here, but it's a very simple document. You'll see it. If you were in that class the last time, you will notice that this is exactly what we did. We went into the box, we did updates, right? We more or less like updated the box. When we were there, we installed Docker. Once we were there, we enabled the service Docker, right? The whole idea is just for it to start whenever you boot up the machine, right? And then that's pretty much what we did the last time if you were in that call. But now we're saying that instead of you going through that route of SSHing into the machine in the public subnet, doing all that, why not create a pipeline that does that build exactly the way you want it, okay? So that's what we're going to be doing here. So we're saying here, we're creating a simple component to install Docker, okay? Once we have that, we're just going to create a component, okay? So install Docker runtime. Maybe I'll put it I'll just do use one, okay? Just in case I have something there before. It's going to create a component. It's very simple. Remember, a component like we've seen, there's like for build component. What do you want to do? Like build, validate, test. There's also like a component for testing. Maybe you just want to test, right? So you start with the components. It's not every time you need a component. In this case, we do need a component because of what we showed the last time, what I showed the last time, and what I'm trying to build on top of. But sometimes you don't need a component. Sometimes it can be as simple as maybe you just want to build off a base AML, right? So we have a component that we just created. So install Docker runtime. Now, the next thing is we'll go to images, pipelines, and we'll create an image pipeline, okay? So when we create an image pipeline, we'll say my EC2, I'm just going to call it my EC2 image, or my custom, I'll just call it my custom image pipeline, okay? So I'll do pipeline. So my custom image pipeline, okay? So I'm going to leave this as is. So that's the beauty about Image Builder. You can actually schedule it if you want to, right? You can schedule it if you want to. You can use cron expression. But in this case, we're going to use the manual approach, meaning the pipeline will trigger. You can trigger the pipeline. But again, this is good because, for example, you can actually schedule it, maybe to build the image at a given time, or you can do some nice stuff around it. But in this case, I'm just going to use manual, okay? Here, if you want to do custom logging configuration, more or less like when the image is building, which logs do you want to generate? I'm just going to leave it with the default. I'm going to go next, okay? It's saying use existing recipe, but I'm not going to use because on this call, we actually want to do everything from scratch, okay? So we'll create a new recipe, okay? Because here, I already created this one before. We're going to create a new one, okay? In this case, what's the image type? I'll say Amazon machine image. You could actually also have like a Docker image, but in this case, we're using Amazon machine image. I'm going to call it my custom image recipe, okay? I'm just going to call it that. And then here, I'm just going to do version 1.0.0, right? This is like the first version. So I'll call it my custom image recipe, right? And then this is where we select the base image. Remember, I think I've shared it before. When you build AMIs, there are different ways you can build AMI. Sometimes AMIs, you can even get them from the marketplace. Somebody has already done the work for you and you're just building off them, right? You can also import your base AMI. You can also use custom AMI, you know. But in this case, we'll use AWS. We'll just select one from AWS, right? So it's Linux. In this case, you can have Windows, Ubuntu, many of the OS that are supported there. So quick start, Amazon manage. So that's what we're going to be using, and we'll select the image type. In this case, we're going to use Linux 2023, x86. You could use any other one that you want to use, right? In this case, it's asking us if we want SSM agents. Remember, if you think about SSM agents are things that actually allows you to go into the machine without needing, more or less like you just use SSM to go into the machine, right? So in this case, it's saying that SSM agent is going to be installed, but you can also add an option to remove it. In this case, I really want it there, okay? User data script, I don't need anyone. The working directory, components is where we need to pay attention to, right? Because components are really the things now that drives how that AMI is brought up, okay? So in this case, you see there is build components, there's also test components, okay? So for the build component, we're going to use some from AWS, right? But remember, we created our own build components in the first place. So what we're going to do is here, we're going to use some build components from AWS. I have two that I want to use, right? And the first one is, if you know, most EC2 machines, they usually use CloudWatch at the end of the day. You want to send logs to CloudWatch. So there's one that has, I want CloudWatch agents to be installed. So I'll just look for CloudWatch. I think I'll do CloudWatch. I'm not sure why I'm not, where is this one? Add build components, Amazon managed. Yes, so I'm looking for the one that is Amazon managed in this case. So I'm going to use Amazon CloudWatch agents. So I'll select this. I'll also look for another one, which is update Linux, okay? So you can see updates Linux by installing all available updates via the update OS action, right? So these are components. Remember, you were building a custom AMI, and these are basically components that will be added as part of the build process. So the first one, we said we wanted CloudWatch to be part of that image that is being built. And then we're saying the second one is that please update the box, okay? So we've chose two components. So if you think about it, we now have two components. But we have to also look for the one we created, right? Because if I come here and say AWS manage and I search for Docker, I won't see, okay? And that's why we created our own custom component. So it means that you can actually use AWS own component if it exists, but you can also create your own component. And we did create our own. And we saw the YAML that is required for you to create it, right? And we follow that step. And we all in our own is very simple. We're just installing Docker, okay, into the box. So in this case, we're just going to go here and say build component owned by me, right? You can see I have 2 of them, but the one we created on this call that you noticed was install Docker runtime. And then I'm going to choose this one. So these are all built, right? And for test, I'll keep it simple. I'm just going to use one that is provided by AWS. So AWS managed, meaning you can also have components that test your image, right? Just the way you test application. You know, if you think about your application, there's a build step, there is a test step, there's a validation step. You can do that even to your AMIs, right? In this case, we'll be adding a test phase to our AMIs, but I'm just going to keep it simple. So I'll just do simple, there's like execute a simple boot test, just to test the boot, right? So I'll select that. And once I have that, I think we're good in terms of things. So think about which we chose 3 build components, 2 from AWS, 1 from us that we built custom, and then we chose a test component. And that test component is basically a simple boot step, but it's also optional. You can choose not to have it, right? Once we have that, the next thing we want to do is, I don't think there is, EBS will keep it as the default. Tags, we don't need, we can move forward, okay? Use default build, we can do a custom workflow if you wanted, but we can actually just use the default, use service default build and test workflow, but you can also create yours, right? So custom workflow in this case, you can, go and choose, just create a workflow for yourself, more or less like how exactly you want to do the build and everything, but we will just go with the default, okay? We'll do next. And here is where you can also create a new, more or less like infrastructure configuration, right? Because if you are building the AMI, the last time we saw, we had to go into a public subnet to do it, right? If you actually have a requirement of a particular VPC you are using to build the AMI, you can choose it here. You can say, use this VPC, use this subnet. In this case, I'm going to create a new infra configuration. So what I'll say my infra config, right? So I'm just going to do infra config. This is where you can be more specific if you wanted. So here, I'm just going to use, I think I already had an IAM role. So here we'll create actually, so I'll call it my infra config, okay? Infra config. And then we'll create an IAM role for this. So I think it must have opened on the other side, okay? So we will create a role. We'll create a role. We'll call it, who is going to use it? Well, we'll say EC2 is going to use the role. And then we'll do next, okay? And then there are 2 policies we just need to attach, okay? The first one is EC2 instance profile for image builder. We need that. The second one, we want SSM manage core, right? So we need this one. So we're creating a role, right? So we'll say EC2 image builder role, okay? So image builder, we'll call it builder role, okay? And then we can leave the description as is, we'll create the role. So we now have a role, and it's called AMI, I think, EC2, yes, image builder role, right? So we'll go back to where we're coming from, and then we'll refresh this to say we want a role, and then we'll just do image builder, okay? So this is the role that we created, we'll create a role. The next thing we want to do now is that, okay, you now have a template, but which instance type is going to be used for building it, right? Or for testing it? This is where we can choose our instance type. And then we can do T2 micro because T2 micro is free tier, right? So we can use T2 micro to do it. We don't need SNS integration if we wanted. VPC, we're just going to use a particular VPC. In this case, there's only one VPC in my account, so I'm going to use the default VPC. But if you have like a custom VPC that you want to use, this is also where you can specify it, right? You can choose a custom VPC that you want to use, and you can use it. Subnet, you can also choose. Security group, you can, but I'm leaving all that optional, okay? And then I'll do next. So subnet, I think it's asking for, is it asking for a subnet in this case? Oh, probably I'll just go without a VPC. If you wanted, you can actually put it in a VPC, choose your subnet, but in this case, I'll go without a VPC, and then I'll go next. Here it is asking me, if I want to use an existing distribution, I can. This is where AMI Builder becomes very powerful, because what it means is that here, it shows me the region that AMI is going to be distributed. But I can actually create a new distribution setting, more or less like how I want that image to be distributed every time I create it. You can have multiple accounts. So think about it that whoever builds the AMI might be building it in one place. They can also be more or less like be publishing it to different regions, right? That can be, in those regions, you can actually also use them, right? So here you can put a name, and then you can actually put many other information. So it's you can go very complex with it if you want. But in our own case, we'll just say, create the image because I'm already in US West 2. So just output that image in this region, okay? And then I'll do next. I think we're just at the end of the step. So I'm going to create the pipeline. So let's recap what we did. There was a role that we needed for the pipeline to use when we created. It needed manage instance core role policy, and then it also needed the profile EC2 instance profile for image builder policy. Okay, we attached that. The most important thing you need to take out is the components that we added. For the build component, we took 2 from AWS. One is to update the box. The second one was basically to install the CloudWatch agent, right? And then the third component we used was our own custom component, which is to install Docker. Then once we left there, we now added just a simple test component, which is to, just to test the boot process, right? Now that that is done, because we did create our pipeline to be manual trigger, right? So only to be run manually, right? We didn't create cron, we didn't create a scheduler. So in this case, but our pipeline is actually ready. It's ready. So what we need to do is we need to run a pipeline. So create run. The pipeline is running, and if you go back to image pipelines, you'll see this is the one we created. The output image is here. It shows that it's building. How are you going to know if it's making progress? That's when you now have to go into EC2. If you go to EC2, you will notice that it would have launched one EC2 machine for building the image. There are 2 things it's going to do. It's going to build. It's also going to test. But if you notice, you see that there is a build that is going on already. Okay, so what it's doing now is that it's taking all the instruction you gave it in the pipeline and it is using it to build an AMI for us. Okay, so this is going to run for a while. So let's just give it time. Let's give it time while it is running. We're just going to wait for a while and see it run and then see the next steps to take after this. So this is now when I want to ask if you have any questions so far. If you've followed up to this point, you have any questions, maybe from your experience or maybe from the things you know with AMI, EC2 image builder, or you just want to ask a question, you can throw it in the chat while we're waiting for it to build, okay? Just know that in this case, we're trying to create an image for our box, right? Sometimes you will use an image that exists, but in most cases, you're always building a custom image, all right? And depending on your application, because sometimes your image needs a theme, maybe it needs some packages, and you don't want to be doing that every time the image is coming up, right? And that's why you pre-package the image, and then you can always build on top of that image, okay? So if I refresh this page, yeah, you will notice the test instance for my custom image recipe has already started coming up, right? So now there is like a test instance being brought up. So if we check, it's basically just going to run the test components that we added for our recipe, right? It's just going to run that step, okay? So it's initializing. We're just going to wait, give it some time. And then once it's done, we'll just test our AMI because once it's done, I think our AMI, but at this point, I think we already have an AMI that we can test with, okay? We already have an AMI, but I just want to wait for it to finish its thing. You can see this is the one we're going to test at the end of the day, right? But I don't want to, I can test it right now, but I'm just waiting for it to complete and then we can actually test it. But the whole idea is for you to see the step, right? The test step here is optional. You can have it, you can choose not to have it. But in this case, you have like a build step for the AMI, and there's like a test step for the AMI. The build is completed, it built an image, and now a test instance is going to come up to try to test that image that was built, and that's exactly what is happening now. And then once this is done, your AMI is ready to go, okay? So let's refresh. Okay, so one thing you will notice is that we created a pipeline. As part of the pipeline, there was like a build instance for my custom image recipe, right? That was done. So that created more or less like the build instance that ran through the build step for the pipeline. Once that was done, it was terminated. And because we did have some testing, more or less like test steps in that pipeline, there was also a test instance for my custom image recipe that was also brought up to test the AMI, right? And both of them were brought up, they ran EC2 machines, and once that was done, they were terminated. So we're good. At this point, we have an AMI that we can test with. And how do we find out? We'll go to AMIs, and what you notice is that here, there is like the one that is my custom image recipe, right? This is the one we need. So what we're going to do is we'll click on the AMI, right? And then we'll launch instance from the AMI. Remember, you can also go and create, like launch EC2 instance, and then from there, you can choose the AMI you want, okay? But here, we're just going to the AMI and then launching an EC2 instance from there. What are we going to do? We'll call it my custom EC2. So we'll just do EC2 custom. It already has the image, right? That was built for us, already set. T2 micro, we'll use that. We can do proceed without a key pair. Security group, we'll just leave everything as a default, okay? We'll just do that. The only thing I want to do is to just use an IAM role. That is the role that I've created before is EC2 role. So I'm just going to scroll a bit up and choose EC2 role. There's nothing special about the role. It's just a role that has access to, what do you call it? So I'm just going to do EC2 and scroll down. So EC2 role. And if you want to actually see what that role looks like, there is nothing special about the role. It's just a simple role. Okay, so EC2 role, this is it. The role is just, it will allow EC2 to assume it. So EC2 can assume that role. And then the permission, I just have one, which is you can use SSM to log into that machine. And that's it. Okay, so it's basic stuff. We've done that over and over and over again. Okay, so when we have that, the next thing we want to do, remember we're trying to launch an instance. What we can now basically do is to go to, that's it. Pretty much that's it. We don't need a user data script. We can just do launch the instance. Okay, so we're launching the instance. Remember, what we want to validate is validate the instance that we're launching against the pipeline that we created. And the pipeline is actually using the custom component that we created, which is the install Docker runtime. So when we actually start running that machine, we should see Docker. We should actually see Docker running, because usually in many of the EC2 AMIs that you have, it doesn't come with Docker, right? But we did build a custom component that would install Docker for us. This can be many things that you wanted to install, but in this case, we're just using Docker as a simplified example because we used it in that last class. And what is expected now is that if we build an EC2 machine of this AMI, it should have Docker already installed because we went through that process. Okay, good. So let's go back to EC2 instance and do instances. Here it is launching. I think it's launching this one. We'll just give it time to do its thing. But let me even see if I can connect. Okay, I can connect. I can either use instance connect. I can use session manager. Session manager, I can only use session manager in this case. And the reason is because that EC2 role has this, right? Amazon SSM managed instance call. If it has this permission, and because we said at the beginning that we needed SSM agent to be on the machine, for that two reasons, we can get into the machine with SSM, okay? I think I've shared that again several times. It's a pattern you need to understand. You'll see them as you grow, okay? So now that the instance is there, I can basically connect. Remember, it's a machine image, right? So at this point, I don't even need to stress. I don't need to wait for the machine to be initialized to be ready because it's a machine image, right? So if I do, just to go in as sudo, I can basically just test and see if Docker is there already. It says Docker command is not found. So let's give it time. I'm not sure at this point why, but let's give it time. It says it's running now. So let's connect again and see if it's going to run. Docker version, okay. Interestingly, it's saying that it's not found. That's one thing with always is that's the funny thing with live demo, right? It's gonna work when you are not demoing it, but when you want to demo it, it doesn't work. It's always funny because let's see what's happening. I think in the process of adding this component owned by me, we probably missed this. It wasn't really added, right? Somehow it wasn't added because I'm not seeing it. But if I have to build that pipeline again, it's going to take time. But you know what? Why not we do it? Because the reason is because I want this recording to be complete, right? So what we're going to do is I'm just going to go back to the image pipeline. I'm going to go back to the custom pipeline that we built. I'm going to edit the pipeline, right? And then I'm going to do next, okay? When I do next, the next thing I want to do is choose, it says no build component, so which means I need to actually edit the recipe, okay? So I'll go back and edit the recipe. Where is it now? I have so many tabs now open. So this is my custom recipe. So what I'm going to do is I'll create a new version of this recipe. And here I'm going to do 1.0.1, okay? I would say everything is the same, all the same things that we chose at the beginning. I'm just going to add build components. So first of all, Amazon managed. If you remember, we added CloudWatch agents, right? If you remember, if you were on the call when we did it, we added CloudWatch. We added CloudWatch agents, and then what else did we add? If you remember, if you were on this call, we added CloudWatch agents, and then we added Which one did we add again? I think we added the update Linux one. So we added the update Linux, this one, right? Good. So once we add, oh, so that was the problem. I see what happened. We chose the recipe, right? We chose them, but we did not add the recipe. So I think that's where I missed it. Okay. So which is something so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit and add this part to the video. We missed this part. We selected, right? So if you think about it now, we've selected two, one and the one that we chose. The only thing we missed, we did not add it to recipe. You can see when we added it, the list shows up, right? So it shows up. And then we also said we needed to add our own. These are some little steps that you can miss, right? But this is not what AI is going to tell you. You have to try this yourself. AI is not going to help you. So I always tell people, ChatGPT is there, all that. Bros, like you have to go into the console. You have to do these things. You have to relate with it. You know, when you master it like this, throwing it to an AI at the end of the day becomes very easy because you know what you're doing. You can lead AI to do some of these things, maybe as infra as code. But sometimes you have to go through it, make the mistake, understand what really went wrong. So like I said, we chose the recipe, but we did not add it. Okay, you can see now that we added it. There are two of them, and then we said we also wanted to add the ones that is owned by us, right? So we're just going to use the Docker runtime. This. Remember, when you click on it, you also have to add the recipe, right? So it's there as part of the build. And then we also said for test. Remember that for test, we said simple boot test, right? So we just did boot. So we did a simple boot. We also needed to add it, right? So add to recipe, and now it's here. And then what we can do is that we can create the recipe, right? Remember, we called it version 1.0.1. We had a new version now. So what we can actually go back to do is we can go back to image pipelines and then just create an image pipeline. So here we have to also edit the components, right? The pipeline, because we made adjustment to the recipe. So what we can do is that we can edit the pipeline. All we just need to do is choose the recipe that it's going to use. So we'll do next. We'll say use latest version available. But sometimes I like to just be specific in this case. So we made a new version, 1.0.1. We want to use that one. So we're going to choose that one. We're just going to do next. Everything is next. We'll just do next, and then just save as is, right? So we now have the custom pipeline has been updated. We just now need to run the pipeline, okay? So once we have corrected the images, once we went back, we fixed the recipe, we fixed the pipeline, and we executed it. It also created new, so it did it more or less like built a new instance for my custom image recipe. It also created the test instance for my custom image recipe again. And then when it was done, it terminated them just as it will do. And at this point, we have a new AMI, right? So we'll have to test that new AMI now. Okay, so we're going to check. If I scroll this a bit and I just order them by the AMI name, you'll notice that this one was created 2108. This one was created 2137. So this one should be the correct EC2 instance now. So I'll click on this one like we've done before, and then we'll say launch instance from AMI. I would say I'll call it my working EC2 instance, okay? EC2 instance. And then once that is done, it's using the AMI. Everything is the same. I'm just going to proceed without the keep here. And then once that is done, we just basically need to give it the role. I think we've done this before. So the role will be EC2 role. So it's EC2 role. We'll do this, we'll select it, and that's it. We'll launch the instance. Let's launch it. Okay. So now that the instance is running, we can actually go and remove this one, the one that we launched before. Remember, we'll refresh. This is my custom EC2. We don't need this one anymore because it's not working as expected. We will terminate it. We'll just instance state, terminate, delete the instance. We'll delete it. Once we terminate, the one we need to keep track of is this one, my working EC2 instance, okay? So we'll just go here and we'll do my working EC2 instance. We will try to connect. We can use any of the routes, but it looks like the session manager is not up yet. So we'll use instance connect. We'll connect, right? When we connect, let's see what we get. Let's see. Okay, so it's live. We'll just do the same thing we're trying to do before, right? So sudo su basically, and just do docker version, okay? yeah, you can see this one is working, right? So we fixed it. We made a mistake during trying to create the image, and then we fixed it, and now it's back. So at this point, there's an AMI that has already gone to, like, it's just like a phase of building the AMI, packaging it and all that. But now, at this point, it means that anybody that's using it does not need to install Docker again. You don't need to. So that can also be a process you use to set up all the tools, all the packages that are going to use, such that when you launch the AMI, it's so fast. And that's how people build the AMI, right? You don't want the AMI every time to be the one loading stuff. You already have it pre-packaged. And then once you just launch the AMI, it has all the tools it needs, right? So you can see it's working. In this case, we can do Docker PS, right? So this is the same thing we did last time. If you remember, the only difference was that we created a box. We entered the box. We did it manually. Then we created an image of it. But now I'm telling you that solution is good. But you can also use the image builder, EC2 image builder, to do the same, which is what we have gone to in this exercise. Okay? We created a recipe. In that recipe, we had the build component. We had a test component. In the build component, we used 2 from AWS. We created 1 for ourselves. And then in the test component, we used 1 from AWS, right? We made it into a recipe. From there, we had like a pipeline. And in that pipeline, we said we wanted to run it on demand. And every time we needed to build a new AMI, we just click run. And then it has an AMI, somebody else can use it. Remember that that's a step. You can orchestrate all that. You can now build orchestration around it to say, maybe if there's something that happens, trigger the build process, right? All that, automation is very easy inside of AWS. But the class itself has been, the value, the message itself has been delivered, okay? So just so you know, we've actually showed exactly what the class is for. That's the Docker. It's obviously the latest Docker, okay? So Docker is running. You can now, at this point, run whatever you want to do. And we're done. So with that done, we just now need to go back to the instances that we created. I think this one is running, right? So this is the one that is working. We're just going to terminate it. All these other ones are terminated. Sometimes it's always good. As part of your cleaning, you just clean up stuff that you're not going to be using. So we'll clean up that. And then we'll go back to our, so that one is terminating. What else? We'll just go to the pipelines that we created. So we'll just go to the pipelines. We'll just delete them. We don't need them again, okay? The class is done. I'm just going to delete the pipelines, okay? Once I'm done deleting the pipelines, I'm just going to go to image recipe. I'm going to delete all of them, okay? I don't need them again. We've shown the points. But now, if you see EC2 image builder in any exam or practically you want to use it, that's exactly what it's for, right? We don't have any container recipe. We don't have, so the only thing we also need to go and do is to check EC2 and check AMIs, just to delete all those AMIs that were created on our behalf, right? So we'll check, there are some AMIs that are here that were created. I'm just going to delete all of them, right? Because AMI, they take space. If you're not careful, you can go above so I'm just going to, first of all, deregister the AMI and delete associated snapshots. It's going to delete it, and then it's gone. Okay, so the class is done. The class is done. So everything about image builder, we've just seen it, right? We just went through it. Do you have any question? Do you have any question at this point? If you have, let me know.